Okay, so ready to head back to Westeros.
Always. Though after that last book, I wouldn't mind a little less, bloodshed this time around.
Let's be real, this is George R. R. Martin we're talking about. Safe to say, A Dance with Dragons isn't going to be a walk in the park for our favorite characters.
True enough, and this book really throws us right into the fire, doesn't it? It's the fifth installment, picks up after a storm of swords, and, well, Westeros is kind of a mess.
To put it mildly, we've got wars brewing, whispers of winter getting louder, and Daenerys. Well, she's found out that being a queen is a lot more complicated than conquering a few cities.
No kidding. And speaking of complicated, Jon Snow's got his hands full up on the wall. Elected Lord Commander sounds impressive, right?
You'd think so. But knowing John, it's probably more headaches than glory.
Bingo. He's facing dissent from his own men, trying to figure out what to do with the wildlings now that they're south of the wall.
Oh, right. And then there's that whole business with the White Walkers, which, no one seems to take as seriously as they should.
Except Jon. He's one of the few who really sees the danger they pose. But trying to convince everyone else that an army of ice zombies is a bigger threat than, say, who's got control of some castle. Uphill battle, to say the least.
And as if he didn't have enough on his plate, John's also wrestling with some pretty heavy moral dilemmas in this book. Like, what do you do when your duty to your vows clashes with what you believe is right?
Yeah, talk about a no-win situation. It's that classic Martin theme, right? The weight of leadership, the impossible choices. And Jon, bless his soul, he always seems to get the heaviest burdens.
It makes you think, if you were in his shoes, facing down ancient ice creatures and a whole lot of human stubbornness, what would you prioritize? Tradition or survival?
Tough call, right? And speaking of tough leadership lessons, across the Narrow Sea, Daenerys Targaryen is learning that ruling a city is a lot harder than conquering it.
Oh, tell me about it. She swoops into Meereen, abolishes slavery, and everyone is just supposed to. What, throw her a parade? Things don't exactly go as planned, do they?
Not even close. Dany's idealism slams right into the wall of reality in A Dance with Dragons. She wants to create a just world, which is admirable, but she underestimates just how deeply entrenched those old power structures are.
And let's not forget, she's also got these, dragons to deal with. Not exactly house pets.
Hardly. They're growing more powerful by the day, and Dany's struggling to maintain control. It's a good reminder that even the best intentions, the noblest goals, they can have unintended consequences, especially when you've got fire-breathing weapons of mass destruction at your disposal.
It's like having those winged powerhouses at your command. Tempting, sure. But Daenerys' struggle to control them reminds us that even the most well-intentioned power can have unintended consequences.
Right, power can be intoxicating, it can be seductive, and it can be incredibly dangerous, even in the hands of someone who wants to do good. And while Daenerys is trying to tame dragons in a rebellious city, Tyrion Lannister is on the run, escaping the clutches of his murderous sister Cersei.
Our favorite Lannister always seems to land on his feet, though, even if those feet are carrying him further and further away from home.
And Tyrion, he can't resist a good dose of political intrigue, even in exile, and boy does he find it. He stumbles right into the path of a young man who calls himself Young Griff.
Okay, pause for a second. For those who haven't gotten to this part yet, who is young Griff? What's the big deal?
Only this. Young Griff claims to be Aegon Targaryen, the son of the Mad King, long thought dead.
Wait, what? So Daenerys isn't the last Targaryen. Talk about a twist.
Right. It throws a wrench into everything we thought we knew about the line of succession. Suddenly, there's a potential male heir to the Iron Throne, one who might have a stronger claim than Dany.
And knowing Martin, this young Griff character is either going to be a huge player in the Game of Thrones or dead before he can say Valar Morghulis.
Probably a bit of both, if we're being honest. And while this Targaryen heir is popping up out of nowhere, Theon Greyjoy, well, let's just say, things aren't going great for him.
Understatement of the century. I mean, we knew Ramsay Bolton was bad news, but Martin really takes us into the depths of psychological torment with Theon's story in A Dance with Dragons.
Yeah, it's brutal. He's broken, tortured, stripped of his identity, and forced to take on this persona of Reek. It's tough to read, honestly, but it's a powerful, unflinching look at the psychological impact of trauma.
And yet, even in his darkest moments, there's this flicker of Theon's former self that refuses to be completely extinguished. It makes you wonder about the limits of resilience, how much a person can endure before they truly break.
Theon's story is a difficult one. But it's a powerful exploration of the human spirit's ability to cling to hope, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty.
And as if physical and psychological torture weren't enough, we have Bran Stark journeying even deeper into the magical heart of Westeros. He's on a quest to find the Three-Eyed Raven, a figure shrouded in mystery and ancient magic.
Remember those weird prophetic dreams Bran's been having since book one?
Oh yeah, those are kind of creepy.
Well, those were just a taste of his powers as a greenseer, his ability to tap into the very essence of Westeros.
So he's not just some kid with a knack for climbing anymore. He's becoming something more, something ancient and powerful, and honestly, still a little creepy.
Well, yeah, he does hang out in a cave with a bunch of old guys who are plugged into a tree. It's like Martin is opening up a whole new layer of the story, hinting at a magical conflict that goes far beyond the squabbles of kings and queens.
Right. It's this clash of the old and the new, the natural and the human, and it adds this whole other layer of tension to the story. We know winter is coming, but with Bran's storyline, it's like we're seeing the magic of that world awaken.
It's a reminder that in Martin's world, the fantastical isn't just window dressing, it's deeply interwoven with the fate of the characters and the very destiny of Westeros. You know, speaking of power struggles and shifting allegiances, things are about to get really interesting over on the Iron Islands.
Oh yeah, the Ironborn, those guys give might makes right a whole new meaning.
No kidding. With their king, what was his name? Balon?
Balon Greyjoy.
Balon Greyjoy. Right, with him out of the picture, it's a free-for-all for the Salt Throne.
And you know it's going to be brutal. So who are the major players in this succession crisis?
Well, you've got Asha Greyjoy, Balon's daughter. She's trying to rally the Ironborn, appeal to their sense of tradition and unity. But it's tough.
Because?
Well, she's a woman in a society that, let's be honest, isn't exactly known for its progressive views on gender roles.
So she's fighting an uphill battle from the start.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, she's got some stiff competition. Her own uncle, Euron Greyjoy, swoops in with promises of conquest and glory. He's got this swagger, this charisma that Asha, well, she just doesn't have.
Euron gives me the creeps. He's got that whole, I'd sacrifice my own brother to a volcano vibe.
Yeah, he's not exactly known for his warm and fuzzy personality, but he's dangerous, there's no doubt about that. And he's got some pretty big ideas for the Ironborn. He even hints at a way to control dragons, which, let's be honest, is a game changer if he can pull it off.
Talk about shaking things up. So it's Asha trying to hold on to tradition versus Euron, who's basically chaos personified. Sounds like a recipe for disaster for the Iron Islands.
It really does. Their rivalry isn't just about who sits on the Seastone chair. It's about the future of the Ironborn themselves. Can they evolve, adapt to a changing world, or are they destined to cling to their old, brutal ways?
It's like they're at a crossroads. And the path they choose will have consequences for everyone. And it's not just Asha and Euron, right? There's another Greyjoy brother in the mix.
Oh, you mean Victarion?
Yeah, Victarion. What's his deal?
Oh, Victarion. He's a piece of work. Strong, brutal, but not the sharpest tool in the shed. And he's got this weird relationship with Euron.
They hate each other, right?
Despise each other. But Victarion is also blindly loyal in a way. Euron sends him off on these dangerous missions, and Victarion, he just goes along with it.
Even though he probably knows Euron's just trying to get rid of him.
Oh, absolutely. But there's something else going on with Victarion in this book. He's got this priest, Makoro, whispering in his ear. And not just any priest. This guy's got some serious dark magic at his disposal.
Oh, yeah, Makoro. I forgot about him. He's bad news, isn't he? Like fire and blood sacrifice, bad news.
Exactly. And he senses a kind of weakness in Victarion, this desire for power and recognition. Makoro's playing him, no doubt about it. But the question is, will Victarion wise up before it's too late?
Knowing Victarion, I wouldn't bet on it.
Fair enough. But hey, speaking of bad decisions and even worse consequences, how about we check in on Cersei Lannister?
Oh boy. Where do we even start with her?
Last we saw her, she was sitting pretty as Queen Regent, right?
Well, sitting pretty might be a bit of an overstatement. Let's just say she had a certain amount of power.
Right, but power is a fickle mistress, and Cersei, well, let's just say she's not exactly known for her restraint.
She's got this knack for making enemies, even when she's trying to be clever. And in A Dance with Dragons, those enemies are circling.
Big time. And she's doing a bang-up job of making things worse for herself.
What's she done now?
Oh, just empowering a radical religious group, the Sparrows, thinking she can control them.
The Sparrows, aren't they like super devout? Almost fanatical?
That's putting it mildly. They're all about piety and punishment, and they're not afraid to use violence to get their way.
So basically, she's unleashed a pack of zealots on King's Landing. What could possibly go wrong?
Exactly. Cersei's always been playing with fire, but this time I think she might have just handed the matches to someone else. Someone who's not afraid to burn everything down.
And while Cersei's busy making a mess of things in King's Landing, Tyrion's off on his own adventure.
Don't forget, he's got that whole on the run from a homicidal sister thing going on.
Right. But he seems to be in his element, even with a price on his head. I mean, he always did love a good game of strategy.
And he sees a golden opportunity in young Griff.
Makes sense. I mean, if you're going to back a horse in the race for the Iron Throne, a Targaryen with a legitimate claim isn't a bad bet.
Exactly. Tyrion's always been drawn to power, even if it's from the sidelines. He wants to be the one pulling the strings, the mastermind behind the throne.
It's like he's trying to outrun his own family legacy, even as he's drawn back into the Game of Thrones.
It's that classic Tyrion paradox. He's cynical, he sees the flaws in the system, but he can't help but try to play the game anyway.
And sometimes, he even tries to do a little good along the way. Or at least, that's what he tells himself.
Sure, let's go with that. But speaking of good intentions running into a wall of reality, let's get back to Jon Snow, shall we?
Oh boy, things are not looking good for our brooding hero on the wall, are they?
Not even close. Remember all that tension we talked about in part 1? The dissent within the Watch, the whole wildlings are the enemy mentality?
Yeah.
Well, it all comes to a head in A Dance with Dragons. Jon's efforts to prepare for the real threat, the one everyone seems to be ignoring.
The White Walkers.
Exactly. Those efforts backfire spectacularly. And let's just say, Jon's leadership skills are put to the ultimate test.
It's classic Martin, isn't it? Just when you think things can't get any worse for a character.
He throws another bucket of ice water on them. But hey, on a brighter note, we do get some chilling reminders about the White Walkers in this book.
Chilling how?
Well, we see them through the eyes of a warg in the prologue, which is always creepy. And Bran's visions in that cave. Yeah, let's just say they don't paint a very optimistic picture of the future.
It's like Martin's reminding us that all this political maneuvering, all these power struggles, they might not mean a damn thing if the White Walkers have their way.
Exactly. The White Walkers are this looming existential threat, the embodiment of Winter's wrath. And they're not going away anytime soon.
You know, we've talked about dragons and White Walkers and political scheming, all the good stuff. But what always gets me about Martin's books, even when it's, well, super depressing.
Oh, you mean like the Red Wedding depressing?
Exactly. Even then, there's this undercurrent of hope.
Yeah.
You know, the sense that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can endure.
Absolutely. And A Dance with Dragons really puts that idea to the test. I mean, these characters are pushed to their absolute limits, physically, emotionally.
And yet, they find ways to keep going. Sometimes it's about clinging to hope. Sometimes it's about fighting for something bigger than themselves. And sometimes it's just about sheer stubbornness.
Yeah, that's the thing about resilience, right? It comes in all shapes and sizes. And it doesn't always look pretty.
Like, take Theon, for example. He's been through hell and back, more than once. He's been broken, tortured, turned into this shell of a person by Ramsay Bolton. It's hard to imagine coming back from that.
And yet, even in their darkest moments, we see those glimmers of Theon's old self, that spark of defiance that even Ramsay couldn't extinguish. It's heartbreaking and hopeful at the same time.
Like that scene where he helps Jane Poole escape from Winterfell, even though he knows it could mean certain death for him. I mean, that takes guts.
Seriously. He's putting his own life on the line for someone else after everything he's been through. It's like a testament to the fact that no matter how broken someone might seem, there's still good in them. Still that capacity for courage, for compassion.
It's almost like in those moments, Theon reclaims a part of himself that he thought was lost forever.
Right. He's not just Reek anymore. He's Theon Greyjoy.
Oh.
And he's capable of so much more than he thought possible. And it's not just Theon, you know? There are so many characters in A Dance with Dragons who are wrestling with their own demons, trying to figure out who they are in a world that's constantly trying to break them.
Like Arya over in Bravos. She's on this whole other level of self-discovery, trying to become no one in the House of Black and White.
Which is such a fascinating concept, right? To completely erase your identity, your past, everything that makes you you.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around. And I keep wondering, can she really do it? Can Arya Stark truly become no one? Or is there a part of her deep down that will always be a wolf?
Right. A girl is Arya Stark, and I don't think even the Faceless Men can completely erase that.
And then there's Brienne. She's still out there, searching for Sansa, even though most people have given up hope.
Talk about unwavering loyalty.
Yeah.
She's faced down bandits, wild animals, even fought a bear for the sake of a promise.
Brienne's such a badass.
Hmm.
I love how she just refuses to be defined by the limitations of her society. She's not a traditional knight, but she embodies the ideals of chivalry and honor more than most of the men in Westeros.
It's true. She's got this inner strength, this moral compass that never wavers no matter what challenges are thrown her way. And speaking of strong women facing down impossible odds, we can't forget about Daenerys.
Oh man, Dany. She's got a whole other level of problems to deal with. Rebellions, betrayals, and those pesky dragons who just won't stay put.
It's like she's trying to juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope.
And yet, even with all that chaos, she never gives up. She keeps fighting for what she believes in, even when it seems like the whole world is against her.
And that's what makes her such a compelling character, right? She's flawed, she makes mistakes, but she's got this fire in her, this determination to make the world a better place. Whether she succeeds or not, well, that's another story.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into A Dance with Dragons, I think that's what I keep coming back to. The power of hope. Even in the face of darkness, even when it seems like all is lost, these characters remind us that there's always something worth fighting for.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we keep coming back to these books year after year, even when they break our hearts. Because they remind us that even in the darkest of times, there's still beauty to be found, still courage, still hope, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of magic.